Psychological and biological dimensions of racism.
Since Anglophobia is a form of racism, to understand it necessitates analysing that larger category. Racism can be defined as hostility in thought or deed directed towards individuals or groups by virtue of their ethnic identity. Ethnocentrism, xenophobia, and other groupish behaviours are not the same as racism, though they share some psychological dimensions. They are all human universals, meaning they are evident in every population that has so far been studied. As explained later in this book, Anglos are among the world's most individualist and least collectivist, in other words, non-racist cultures. However, differences in ethnic behaviours, those predicated on ethnic identity, are quantitative, not qualitative. In other words, all groups show them, though in varying degrees. Research into conduct contingent on social identity has revealed a number of types which we will now list.
1. Ethnocentrism.
This is a concept invented by the American sociologist William Sumner in 1906. He wrote, quote,
Loyalty to the group, sacrifice for it, hatred and contempt for outsiders, brotherhood within, warlikeness without, all grow together, common products of the same situation. It is sanctified by connection with religion. Men of an others group are outsiders, with whose ancestors, the ancestors of the we group, waged war. Each group nourishes its own pride and vanity, boasts itself superior, exalts its own divinities, and looks with contempt on outsiders.
Unquote. Thus, ethnocentrism engenders feelings of superiority or supremacy, a term too often applied exclusively to white ethnocentrism. Sumner's formulation included xenophobia, hatred and contempt, as an integral part of ethnocentrism. The two behaviours are now seen as distinct, though related. Ethnocentrism is part of a wider range of psychological mechanisms dealing with social identity. These include the propensity of humans to join and identify with groups and to view their own groups positively, ethnocentrism, and other groups negatively, xenophobia. This tendency appears to be innate, which means it is the result of biological evolution because it emerges in childhood, is a cross-cultural universal, and is shown by man's closest animal relative, the chimpanzee. The evolutionary explanation takes note of the danger posed by tool-using humans, since humans were apex predators in the primordial past. As their populations grew, neighbouring human groups became an important part of the hostile environment. This human environment selected for the groupish instincts discussed earlier because humans who had this instinct had an evolutionary advantage over those who did not. Further evidence of innateness comes from the effect of oxytocin on men and women. In women, this hormone promotes individual bonding and caring. It is released during breastfeeding and sex. In men, oxytocin increases ethnocentrism. Double-blind administration of oxytocin shows that the hormone boosts men's protectiveness towards their group and promotes group trust, cooperation, and defensiveness. It does not increase aggression towards competing groups. This is further evidence that ethnocentrism is distinct from xenophobia. All this is compatible with the theory that humans are evolved to live in groups, identify with and contribute to them, because the welfare of the group affects its members' reproductive fitness. The second type of conduct contingent on social identity is
2. Xenophobia.
This refers to the fear and loathing of strangers, which is closer to the common sense meaning of racism. Xenophobia is described by part of Sumner's statement quoted above. It is a universal stage of child development from about 5 to 10 months. This precedes emergence of self-identity. Xenophobia is also known as negative ethnocentrism. Both xenophobia and ethnocentrism are discriminatory. Xenophobia is discrimination against an individual or group, whilst ethnocentrism is discrimination in favour of one's group. Parenthetically, this makes discrimination a socially neutral concept because social engagement entails making discriminations of various kinds. When discrimination is used as an accusation, it is usually shorthand for discrimination against an individual or group. Xenophobia can lead to stigmatization, causing hostility towards a particular identity that can persist in a population for generations. Fear of unfamiliar individuals is opposed by interest in socializing, also universal of human cultures. Both tendencies were adaptive in the evolutionary past and are shown by other primates. As a result, social contact between strangers is qualified by ambivalence. The third type of conduct contingent on social identity is
3. Individualism and collectivism.
Collectivism is another common-sense element of racism. People belonging to collectivist cultures are more likely than those in individualist cultures to make decisions based on the rules and welfare of their groups. These groups can be families, clans, ethnicities, and religions. Collectivism has been measured and compared around the world, notably by social psychologist Harry Triandis. People who score highly on collectivism will often override their personal preferences in order to serve their kinship group. Collectivist cultural regions include North Africa, the Middle East, and China. By contrast, Anglos bear the culture that evolved in northwestern Europe, one of the most individualist cultural regions. The social psychologist Richard Nisbet has found that this cultural dimension affects ways of thinking. Westerners have tunnel vision, while East Asians are more holistic. Westerners are more prone to believe they can understand and therefore manipulate things. Asians less so. The two cognitive styles coincide with Western individualism and Asian collectivism. The fourth type of conduct contingent on social identity is
4. Assortment by similarity.
Racism is also thought to consist of preference for one's own ethnic group, though this is a pro-social form of ethnocentrism, unlike antisocial xenophobia. The old adage, birds of a feather flock together, has been well confirmed for humans. Most people prefer to marry, live among, and work within their own ethnic group. This is often true of individuals whose conscious political values run in the opposite direction. That is, people who praise diversity. The result is that diverse societies are prone to sort themselves by ethnicity as well as by income and ideology. The United States today is as segregated voluntarily as it was during the height of forced segregation a century ago. Ethnic assortment is not surprising when it is realized that ethnic groups are pools of genetic kinship. The fifth type of conduct contingent on social identity is
5. Ethnic group interests.
Relations between ethnic groups can become fraught and sometimes savage because those groups carry vital interests for their members. As early as the 1970s, the evolutionary biologist William Hamilton suggested that ethnicities are large pools of genetic kinship and that it is adaptive for their members to care for their ethnic groups. This is because ethnicity is defined as descent from common ancestors. Ethnic kinship was quantified in 2002 by geneticist Henry Harpending in conjunction with political ethologist Frank Salter. An ethnic group carries many more copies of its members' gene variants than does the largest family. Ethnic groups also carry cultural and religious interests. Other ethnic interests are social inclusion and cohesion, because as ethno-religious diversity increases, cohesion falls and conflict rises. Most people choose to live among their own people and to make friends and marry among them. Ethnic identity is adaptive because it allows people to defend their ethnic genetic interests. Conversely, encouraging an ethnic group to lose its identity is like encouraging parents to forget who their children are. The sixth and final type of conduct contingent on social identity is
6. Structural, institutional, and systemic racism.
Such terms are often used when evidence of actual racism is thin, but is nevertheless suspected. For example, due to the underrepresentation of protected groups in an organization or vocation. These types of racism are held to be embedded in the structures and systems of society or organizations. A popular example on the left is the apartheid regime in South Africa from 1948 until the early 1990s. Blacks were denied equal rights to whites, for example, by being segregated in housing and use of public facilities and expected to live in their designated tribal homelands. They had to carry a pass to enter white areas. The structural or systemic effect of this contributed to black disadvantage. Harm to blacks did not come only from racist whites, but from unjust laws and regulations acting through bureaucracies. Another example of systemic racism is China's policy of cultural genocide directed at Tibetan and Uyghur peoples. The main harm comes not from individual behavior of the Han majority, but from government policy exercised by the military, police, and other bureaucracies.
This video has been proudly produced by the British Australian community.